Hello everyone, I hope you're all well and welcome to the MOOC series called Music and Geography. So in this series we'll have 4 episodes that we will travel to 4 different parts of the world, and through this travel we will learn about some basic stuff about the music from each place, from each culture, as well as getting to know some different types of musical phrases, fragments, pieces that we can play, either in a rhythmical sense or a melodic sense, and so on. So, our first stop of this series is Indonesia. So, Indonesia is a country in Asia, as you know. It's a huge archipelago with 13,000 something islands, maybe it's even more. I always lose the number. It's a wonderful place. If you have visited or if you plan to visit, it's a really wonderful place with very rich culture in all sense. And what personally attracted me in Indonesia, and that's why I'm presenting this chapter on this series, is the music of Indonesia, and the traditional music of Indonesia, which is called gamelan or gamelan. Some people call it gamelan, some people call it gamelan. So gamelan music is a traditional ensemble music from the Javanese, the Sundanese and the Balinese people of Indonesia. And this music is, this ensemble, let's say, is made predominantly by percussive instruments. And as you might have seen before, these instruments are consisting from really large gongs up to very, very small pots. And they are all pitched, besides the kendang, the percussion instrument, which is a skin, and it's used as a rhythmical foundation of the music. And it's also the instrument that registers the beat in most cases. Gamelan music exists, as I said, mainly on the islands of Java and Bali in Indonesia, and has developed following different roles within the society in each place. Gamelan started as a court music and evolved as something else. For example, in Bali at the moment, gamelan is really spiritual music. It's connected with ceremonies and other rituals they make in the island of Bali. And in Java is still court music, but it's also accompanying shadow theater, other theater performances, dance, and even as concert music. And gamelan music shares some common characteristics, of course, between these places. Mainly their scales, their pentatonic scales, because it's music that is constructed on pentatonic scales. Some instruments are also very similar, for example, the gong, some metallophones, if you'd like to call them that way. But the musical structure varies a lot. And we'll see some examples from these different types of gamelan music, so that you are also more acquainted with the different types of gamelan music. And let's start by the gamelan music from Java. As you can see in this picture, this is a traditional ensemble of Javanese gamelan music, and you can see the instruments there. We can see the gongs at the back. You can see these other instruments, like the small kettles with something on top, which are called bonang in Javanese gamelan music, and all the other instruments at the back. I will not name each one, but you can see how it looks and how an ensemble of gamelan looks like from the islands of Java. Besides these instruments, there's also some string instruments, voice, and some wind instruments that sometimes accompany the gamelan orchestra. That usually these instruments have a more, let's say, solistic role. But the main foundation of the gamelan music ensemble are the percussion instruments that you see above. And as you can see, there are many instruments, so this implies that a gamelan orchestra is consisting of different people, a lot of people actually, that each person, then that's one of the beauty I find in gamelan music, each person music role, let's say, within the ensemble is connected with someone else. So within an ensemble of gamelan music, there's this kind of common lung which breathes, that consists of all the people who are taking part of this ensemble. And enough of me talking about this, let's see some gamelan music examples, and let's start by seeing something from the Javanese musical tradition. So this is Javanese gamelan music. You got an idea of how Javanese gamelan sounds like. Of course, this is one piece from one place in Java, and according to each place there's also some different interpretations, different songs, and all the rest. And since I'm talking about places in Java, let's see an example of Sundanese gamelan music. You can already feel the difference between the two styles, how one is more laid back and focuses on colors and how rhythms are connected. This one is more groovy, I would say. It's more uplifting. The relationships of instruments is different. The percussion instrument is also different. So let's listen to an example of Sundanese gamelan music. I hope you enjoyed the Sundanese gamelan as well. And now let's move to the Balinese gamelan, which is where we will focus a little bit more in this case. So as you can see in the picture, this is how a Balinese gamelan orchestra looks like. And already you can see some differences. First of all, the kendang, the percussion instrument, looks very different from the Javanese one. You can see that there are less gongs in a Balinese gamelan orchestra, but there's many more metallophones. So just considering this fact only from a picture, you can already have a sensation that, okay, the music must be also different, since these instruments are also different. And you can see what I mean by listening to some Balinese gamelan music. And as I mentioned before, in the island of Bali, gamelan is being performed. It is being performed in many rituals and many ceremonies from the religion. And if you have the opportunity also to visit the island of Bali, you will hear this music practically everywhere, which is something I found very beautiful and attracted me also to go there and study their music as well. So let's listen to some Balinese gamelan now before we move on to making some music. So this is Balinese gamelan. One of the elements that really attracted me in Balinese gamelan music, and the one I would like to share with you from a practical point of view, is a concept called kotekan. So essentially what kotekan means, kotekan is like two interlocking melodies that work together as a single melody. So in a way, it's a melody that has been broken down rhythmically at a certain way, so that when one player plays something and the second player plays something else, when these are combined, they construct the musical melody. It's an idea I find beautiful in many senses, and mainly from the part that, in order for something to exist, one needs the other. So this melodic line played by one person is not complete without the other one, and vice versa. And also, in order to make these lines musical, you need to feel the other person, you need to feel the other performer. You need to breathe together, to fill in your gaps together, and like that, you create this unity between two people that create this melody. So in order to do a kotekan, first of all, we need two people or more, but always in couples. And the first group would say, let's say, or the first person would play one part and the second person would play another part. I have here some examples. I wrote down some very basic examples on how can this be translated in Western notation, and we can try them with different stuff from our mouth, by singing or by playing, sorry, my cat is in the picture, I hope you don't mind. So, or by playing some objects we find in our house. Of course, if we have access to a gamelan orchestra, that would be even better. So, in this example, I just took two glasses. I used two glasses and a chopstick as my mallet to play them. But you can use really everything. You can even sing. I am not a good singer, that's why I try to avoid singing. So I took two glasses and I will use them as the foundation of these two notes that you see in the picture. They are not the same notes, that's why I don't have a treble clef or anything. There are just two heights, let's say, a lower and a higher one. Okay, so let's start by doing the first layer. The first layer sounds like this. If this is our beat, ta, 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 ta. And actually, I should hold them the other way around because this is lower if we want to be precise with the melodic line. So I do it again, 3 and. Rest, rest, rest. This is my first layer. This rest is really important because this is the rest that the second layer will be feeling with their melody. Okay? So we need to be always feeling the tempo. Ta 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 ta. Okay, I think this was fairly easy. Let's also now try to make the second layer. I will use the same ones for this example. So this is my beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my second layer. Now I made some recordings that you can also use if you want to practice them on your own. So you can play the second layer and then play the first layer on top, and vice versa. Don't worry so much about the pitch now. Let's try to focus on the rhythm and how this melody is constructed following this idea that one layer is playing something else, the second layer is playing something else, and together they form something together. So I will play the first layer now. Sorry, I will play the second layer from my computer, and then I will be playing live the first layer. This is my tempo, a bit faster. This is the second layer. And now I will play the first layer. 3 and. Do you hear how the melody is created? And now let's do the opposite. So I will play the first layer from my computer and I will be playing the second layer on these glasses. This is the first layer. And now we'll play the second layer. 3 and down. And so on and so forth. Did you pay attention on how the other layer fills in the breaks of this one? Let's do it one more time. I will just play the layer 2. Dum, da, dum, dum, da, dum. So there are some rests now. If I play the first layer again, pay attention to how the layer fills in my rest. 3 and. So on and so forth. Now let's listen to both layers together, how they are being played by the computer, because I cannot play both layers at the same time. Of course I could if I had the instruments and everything else, but I would like you to pay attention on how they sound from the same instrument. In this case it's the computer, but if you do it with a partner and you use the same instruments, this would be the end result. Try to hear each layer independently. Layer 1, second layer, and so on. In this case, I also used the notes if I had treble clef, let's say. So, si, re, si on the first layer, and then mi, sol, mi. Just so you could also, in case you want to play it with notes, you can use these notes if you want this example. But any notes should work. You can create any scale you want, you can take notes from any scale, as long as there are two different notes, a high one and a low one. Alright, let's see some more examples. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are two layers, right? A lower one and a higher one. In Balinese gamelan, the way they call these layers is polos for the lower layer and sanksi for the higher layer. So if we are in a gamelan orchestra and they tell us you play polos, we know, okay, we'll play the lower part of the melody. And if we play sanksi, will be the highest part of the melody, and so on. So in these two examples, I have polos and sanksi in these interlocking patterns. So first of all, I will play the patterns individually. So I will start with polos. Polos is also let's say the foundation of the melody. It always starts on one polos. Sanksi sometimes starts on two. In these examples, I don't have something like that, but that could be also a possibility. So I start with polos. Let's say this is my high one, this is my low one. So this is example 1. 3 and tam tiram tam tiram tiram tam tiram tiram tam tiram tiram tam 1 1. This was polos, and let's try now sanksi. 3 4 tarim tarim tim tarim tarim 1. That's it. Now let's try to play it with the recording. So on the first part I will play the Sangsi. And now I will play the Polos. Dum, dee, dum, dum, dee, dum. 3 and let's do this one more time. I was not synchronized with them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. I don't know if you could hear the gaps, how they are filled up by one another. And of course the notes don't really match, but we don't do this for the notes now. We do this to get the sensation of how one line is completing the other line, and so on and so forth. Let's play them together now to see how they sound with the same instrument, let's say, which in this case is a MIDI instrument from the computer. That's it. You hear this? This would be our melodic line that is broken in two, and when the two are combined, they are creating this loop. Etc. Let's look at the second example now. Let me do each line individually again. So I start with Polos. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dum, da-dim, da-dim, dee-dum, dee-dum, da-dee-dum, da-dim, da-dim, dee-dum, dee-dum, da-dee-dum, da-dim, da-dim, dee-dum, dee-dum, da-dee-dum. That was my Polos, and now this would be my Sangsi. 3 and da-da-dum, da-dum, dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, dum, da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum. Okay, now let me play one while hearing the other one. So I start by playing Polos again. 2, 3, 4. That was Polos. Pay attention to this rest again. Whenever I'm making rest, the other layer is playing something. And now let me play the Sangsi part. 3 and. That was it. Now let's listen to them together. the melody? In order to have this, we need these two layers. So, this was some examples of Kotekan. I will also share a video that focuses on example of Kotekan, how it can be played. Of course, this is a much more complicated, and you can see how this can be developed more and more and more and more and more. According to the length of a phrase, then we can have a different kind of Kotekan, and so on and so forth. So this was one very small chapter from a huge chapter which is called gamelan music, which I found interesting to share with you because this is something that can be applied even with any instruments that we're playing. As long as we're two people, we can always find ways to break down a melody and create two layers where one plays on the places the other person is not playing, and create melodies together in this way. One last very important thing that I forgot to mention about gamelan music is that now everything I was doing as an example was starting on one. Because as Western musicians, we are accustomed to start always something on one. In gamelan music, everything starts before one. So all these things you hear always start before one. But I did it in this way because this would be an easier approach to create these rhythmical patterns. So I hope you enjoy them, and I'll see you at the next chapter.